Hello, I'm Jane Bothwell. I'm a local herbalist, and I teach classes and work with people with teaching them how to use herbs medicinally, and also how to go out in the wild and pick your salads and how to eat your weeds instead of throwing them out. And I'm going to give a general talk today about using herbs, gardening with them, and all the different things that you can do to appreciate them and incorporate them in your life. And Bonnie just had a question about catnip, and I was just looking that up, and there's so many herb books out now that there used to be when I first started studying one book. And everybody who was interested in herbs had that one book. And now there's so many books that I can't even keep track of them. And in between then, most of the people writing books I knew, and now I don't. So what I say is if you find a book that you're attracted to and it seems like it has good information, then certainly purchase it. And the secondhand bookstores are very good places to look for herb books. It's a good idea to have a couple different herb books so that you can cross-reference and you can see what one book says, and then another, like 3 books, is really good to have. This one is called The Illustrated Book of Herbs, Their Medicinal and Culinary Uses. And one thing I like about this book is that it has very beautiful pictures. And this one is probably the plant you were asking about? Catmint.
Okay. But what does catnip look like?
And this is calling catmint catnip. So here is an example of that. The common name is not truly what this plant is. So not even in books is all your information accurate.
So it's good in teas, and you can eat the whole thing.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I won't go crazy like the cat.
Well, you can find out. They affect people differently. Okay, let's.
Smoke it.
It's a mild sedative, stomatic, what we were talking about, works on the stomach. Carminative, same thing, helps with diarrhea. Diuretic, helps take water weight out of the body. It mostly is used here in this description the same way that catnip is used, which is catnip is mostly used for the nervous system and used for the digestive system. And this is another. See, now they're calling this one black cumin and fennel flower, and I call it love in the mist.
Oh, you can eat that?
This flower.
Oh.
That's in our tea today, too. And if you ever grow love in the mist, it grows, self-seeds, and grows everywhere.
So what do you do with that?
I haven't used, I don't know medicinal uses of it. I would probably just look down here and see.
But you've got it in the tea.
I have it in the tea because I know that it's an edible flower. And I like to put flowers in tea because I think that it's pretty, for one thing.
So what part did you put in?
I put in the flower.
The flower, not
Yeah.
after it potted up. But
No, but the flower. In cooking, the seeds can be used as a substitute for pepper and can be sprinkled on bread and cakes. In France, the seeds are sometimes called quatre épices. Oh, my French, not very good. 4 spices. Oh, black cumin seeds should not be confused with those of true cumin. So I guess it tastes kind of like cumin seeds. Well, that'd be interesting. Take the seeds and grind them up.
There's certainly an awful lot in that pond.
Right, there are a lot. So we were doing some introductions in anybody's interest, and now the camera's on, everyone will be shy. So, did anybody else want to introduce and say what your interests were, or your experiences with?
I think they're probably all about the same.
All about the same? Okay. Just want to know. So I just turned to this plant, which is fennel. And fennel grows all around here. Some people call it licorice. And it's in the tea, which gives it its sweet taste. And it's a wonderful plant to use. And it grows everywhere. You see it mostly along roadsides, but I think that's because when we're looking at plants, a lot of times we're walking along the road. And of course, it's not a good idea to harvest along the road because of the fumes from the cars. So when you see it along the road, it's a good chance if you walk a little ways back from the road that you're going to find it there too. And mostly what you read about in your herb books and you see in your herb shops is you see fennel seed. Okay, which is after it flowers, which is a picture of it flowering, and then a picture of it in seed, and here's a picture of the seed or the fruit and a picture of the flower. But you can also use the leaf, and the leaf is very, very tasty. And the bulb is used of the fennel too. That's you'll see that sometimes sold in grocery stores. Fennel bulb, it's used a lot in Italian cooking. And it's a very sweet taste in tea, which a lot of our taste buds are very much acclimated towards the sweet taste. So a lot of people really like it. So it's good for adding into teas that maybe you want to drink for their medicinal purposes, but you don't like the taste so much. It also has, of course, its own very good uses, which is, again, it's a tea that's good for digestion. Most sweet kind of and minty tasting teas are good for that purpose, if you can make a broad generalization. It's also excellent for eye washes. It's very good if you have any irritation in your eyes to make a tea from fennel leaf or seed, and then you can rinse your eye with it with an eye cup, or you could put some drops in your eye with a dropper, or you could just dip a handkerchief or a cloth in it and lay that over your eyes. So it helps to restore tired eyes and irritated eyes. And it's also a nice one to put little pieces of in spaghetti sauce and in salad dressings and in your salads. And when you're growing your herbs, most of your herbs grow very easily. And when they're little, like when we're little, we take a lot more care and tending. But once the herbs are established, unlike us, we still take more care. We can do it a little more on our own, though. Once the herbs are established, then they really don't need much care at all. They hardly need any water. They grow to be beautiful bushes, a lot of them, like your lavenders and your sages. And they are perennials, a lot of your herbs, which means they will come back year after year after year. And the herbs that are annuals in your garden, which means that they grow 1 year, most of those will self-seed. So they will come up by distributing their seeds and coming up again in your garden. The herb garden that, well, I mentioned earlier that we just moved, so I'm moving my herb garden, but we've been there for 5.5 years, and my main weeds are mullein and peppermint and spearmint and blue vervain and all the wonderful herbs that I've planted, because they're all self-seeding and coming up. So people come up with trays and they start their herb garden as we weed my garden. And that's the way it works, and it's wonderful. You just get your herbs going and then they'll keep going. As far as tending them, most of them, like the ones that get woody, like the sages and the lavenders, like to be cut back in the fall, and then and you can also prune them to the shape that you want them to be. You can also pick your herbs, like your sages are wonderful. They make beautiful flowers, and there's so many different ones. You can start with very early blooming sages like Jerusalem sage, and then next comes your garden sage and your golden sages, and then as the summer progresses, your pineapple sage will bloom, which smells like pineapple, the leaves do, and the flowers are red, and when you soak those red pineapple sage flowers in vinegar, like a light colored vinegar, like a rice vinegar or a white vinegar, they turn your vinegar pink. So it's really pretty to make vinegars out of the pineapple sage blossoms. Another thing is purple basil will turn white vinegar purple too. A lot of times when making your herb vinegars, your herbs don't change the color, but those do in particular. And a little bit moving around from gardening to herb vinegars. You can make the simplest way to make your vinegars is you pick your herbs, whatever you happen to have. I put a little bit of sage and tarragon and thyme and maybe marjoram, and you pour your vinegar over and you put a lid on it and you've made your herb vinegar. It's as simple as that, and they're beautiful. They're very beautiful presents. They're beautiful containers to have sitting around in your kitchen. And the vinegar is very tasty, and it's also very medicinal.
Do you ever add oil to that, to your vinegar at all?
I add it after, I actually would mix my oil with my vinegar when I'm making like a salad dressing.
And what kind of oil do you use?
I use olive oil a lot because olive oil is it's the most nutritious oil, and it's also the oil with the longest shelf life. Oils, you have to be a little bit careful about them going rancid.
What about safflower?
Safflower is a wonderful oil to use. I would keep it in the refrigerator. And canola is a nice oil to use. And you can make herbal oils too. So you can soak herbs in oil, so you can have your herbal oil going and you can have your herbal vinegar going, and then you can mix them. Like a garlic oil is a really nice one to make.
And that should be kept in the refrigerator then after you made it?
After you make it. And in order to, when you're making your oils, it's a little bit trickier than making your vinegars, because if you're making oils with fresh herbs, the fresh herbs have water in them. And the water and the oil don't mix well, as we all know. And the water in the oil tends to make the oil go rancid after a certain period of time. So when you can, it's better to make your oils with dry herbs. And then you don't have the problem with the water and the oil. And then you just strain it out. Like just take a cloth, piece of muslin or cheesecloth or an old handkerchief, and pour your oil and your herb mixture through that, and then squeeze it out and put your herbs in the compost, and then you have your nice garlic oil. You've squeezed out the garlic, and then you have your... And if you want to, for aesthetic reasons, you can, put a garlic clove or two back in that and put it in a nice bottle. And that's the way they make the herb vinegars that are sold that'll have like one sprig of tarragon. They used to have a lot of sprigs of tarragon in there to get a strong flavor. Then they strained out the tarragon herbs, put the vinegar in a nice bottle, put one sprig back in, and that's how you get your tarragon vinegar. Because one sprig isn't going to give a strong flavor. So I'm just kind of jumping around here and giving you a little spattering of this and that. And in that respect, are there any questions, the other ones that have popped up?
I have a ground cover that's Greek oregano. Is that edible?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's edible. And interestingly, with the what I was taught by one of my herb teachers, the spaghetti herbs, oregano, rosemary, basil, thyme, they're all very good immune-enhancing herbs, which I thought was wonderful information to have. First of all, they're delicious and most people like ingesting them. And next of all, it's beneficial for all of us to enhance our natural immune system so it works more efficiently, so we get sick less often. And those herbs are really wonderful for that. So if you made a vinegar with your oregano and you use that, you're getting the medicinal properties of that oregano. So it's tasty and it's also enhancing your natural immunity.
I always thought that vinegar was undigestible.
Vinegar is actually very healthful for you. The best vinegar is organic apple cider vinegar. And that is actually, for most people, something beneficial to ingest. About a tablespoon a day. Really helps to balance your pH level, helps aid your digestion, it's a cleansing agent for the body, and then when you add your herbs in it, then you're getting the added effect of the herbs. White distilled vinegar is not necessarily very healthful vinegar. When I'm using a white vinegar, because I want to get a colored vinegar from my different colors of the plants, I usually use a rice vinegar.
Can you buy those at the co-op or at the health food store?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's that delicious-looking jar that you have there?
This delicious-looking jar is the tea that I made this morning. I filled the jar with the herbs and then poured hot water over it. Now, a trick that you probably do know is if you put a knife in a jar like this when you're pouring boiling water into it, then the knife will be a conductor for the heat and the jar won't crack. So that's something to, yeah, oh, that's a good thing to know, because I always put it in the sink anyway, just in case, but the jar doesn't crack in that case. And I put in fennel, which is this big stalk and these kind of ferny-looking leaves, and fennel and lemon balm and peppermint, and all of those were from my garden. And yerba santa, which is a shrub that grows a little bit more inland where it's a little drier. I was just out in Weaverville doing an herb talk out there, and I harvested a lot of it, and it has a real kind of almost resiny flavor to it. I'm not sure. It's a little bit minty, but it's more pine tasting than that. And it's very, very excellent for the respiratory system and very good for allergies. And a lot of people are experiencing allergies this time of year, and yerba santa is a good herb for that. I also picked a few flowers this morning, these little yellow calendula, or another name for calendula is pot marigold. And then some love in the mist, which is a little faded blue flower over here. And with your herb teas, when you make them this way, you can either do it like I did this morning. I just put the herbs in here, put boiling water over it, put a lid on it. And it's good to let your herb teas sit for a while. I think that's one place that sometimes we don't make our herb teas strong enough to get their medicinal effects.
Could you make this herbal tea like you do sun tea?
Exactly.
And it makes it so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering if
Yeah.
you get the same sun tea.
So how does this taste? It's good?
Very tasty.
Yes, okay.
Very good. Have you
I think I have to develop a liking for it.
You'd have to develop a liking. We'd make a different one for you. It's kind of strong, a little sweeter. So a little more fennel, and an herb that is the sweetest thing I have ever tasted is called stevia, which is S-T-E-V-I-A. Another name for it is sweet herb. And if you take a little pinch of that herb in like a pot of tea, it is much sweeter than sugar. And since that's come back onto the herb market, which has probably been, I would guess, maybe the last 5 years, you'll see most of the preparations have stevia in them. Most of your commercially made teas, and of course the reason is most people like sweet, and kids. And so stevia would be a really, if you like sweet, it would really be an herb to get familiar with, because you can. I don't know that it would grow around here. It's a shrub and it's Mediterranean, and possibly would, because most of our herbs are Mediterranean, and we have a somewhat Mediterranean climate here. But it's very easy to purchase in all your herb shops. What?
The moist part.
Right, the moist part. Well, the moderate climate, you know, it's 60 most all year, right? This one also is has some, like that yerba santa is kind of a strong taste in here, and so with a sun tea, you just pour, you know, tap water over it and let it sit out in the sun for about 3 hours, and you have a delicious tea. Really delicious, and it's wonderful to just walk. I just take a jar and just walk around my garden and pick, you know, little oregano, little lemon balm, some calendula flowers, fuchsias, some pansies. Fuchsias are edible, and the fuchsia, and they're so beautiful. Now, when you make it your next cake, you can decorate it with fuchsia flowers and love in the mist and calendula petals and pansies, and you eat. All those are edible. I don't decorate with anything that's not edible. Almost all flowers are edible.
Hummingbirds like it.
Yeah?
There's a lot of sweet nectar in there.
And the berry is, no, they don't eat it. The berry is very good. The berry that forms after the fuchsia flowers. I learned this because outside my office there were 2 big fuchsia plants, and there were 2 little kids just munching away, and I went out, you know, and said, it's edible? Yeah, we've been eating it. Our mother told us, you know, and I said, yeah. So I learned it from 2 children doing it, and I've been eating them for years since, and they're very tasty. The berry is tastier than the flower. Different flowers have different tastes. But it's so wonderful to put flowers on your cakes, put flowers in your muffins, put flowers in your salads, decorate, you know, your omelets with flowers. And fun thing to do too with flowers is to take your ice cube trays and put some flowers, like a little tiny Johnny Jump Up or a little pansy in each one of the cubes of your, and you could have that like mint apple juice mix and freeze that with a little sprig of mint in each one of the cubes and that's a lovely way to drink it. For my daughter, I make popsicles for her that are a mixture of juice and herb tea. And of course, and they love the popsicles, and sometimes she does it with me, and we put little petals in there, and it's really fun. And and working with herbs, I find for most people it really enhances their life. Most people tend to their spirits get raised, their energy is raised, their enthusiasm and excitement for life is generally invigorated by working with the plants. It's real exciting to teach classes and talk about it in that way. And when I do ongoing classes, people come back and they just are usually more and more and more excited. And you know, especially when I talk about the weeds, you know, and you can eat chickweed. Chickweed, I pull that out of my garden all the time, people say. I'll see if there's a picture of it in here. Chickweed is also one of the tastiest. There probably isn't, because it's just such a common weed, and this is mostly beautiful flowers in here. No, it isn't in here.
Can you tell us the story of how you got interested in herbs and how you educated yourself?
Let's see, after I get this eyelash out of my eye, you're editing this, right? Before you're...
Not at all.
Oh, not at all. Right, get a close-up on this. How I got interested in herbs was starting to garden with vegetables. And actually, first, I think house plants. And I just really enjoyed being with plants. And then I started doing vegetable gardening. And then I started going backpacking. And that was all about 20-plus years ago, when I was about 20. No, this was back east. I was in Pennsylvania at that time. And then I had a friend who started to talk to me about doing yoga and possibly changing my diet and what vegetarianism was. And then I got interested in plants for their medicinal uses. And I was introduced to a friend who owned a health food store. And I always had colds my whole life. My mother told me I was born with a cold. And as my colds went, I knew that I got a sore throat, and then I got a runny nose, and it lasted about 7 days. And so I was getting a cold, and I said, well, okay, I'll go to my friend who owns the health food store, and I'll say, well, what do you have? And she says, well, here's a great capsule, and you take 2 of these capsules every 2 to 3 hours, and I bet your cold will only last a day or 2. And I said, well, sure, I'll try it. And it worked, and it was incredible. And from then on, I've been a total believer in herbal remedies, because when I'd had something that long and something worked. Now, of course, this remedy was, as some herbal remedies are, it was mostly garlic. So the flavor and my aroma during that time of getting over my cold was not appealing to everyone. But that's mostly what the remedy was. It was called CNF capsules, and it was Dr. Christopher's Nature's Way from Utah. And it was garlic with some parsley in it, which is supposed to help cut the odor. And it's worked wonderfully. So from there on in, I just kept studying and took the Dominion Herbal College's correspondence course, and then I wanted some live teachers rather than just my book, and I went to the California School of Herbal Studies, which is what brought me from Utah to California. So we've jumped from Pennsylvania to Utah to California. And that's in Sonoma County in Forestville. And then, as I did mention earlier, I went there as a student and then ended up staying for 8 years and became part of the staff and taught classes there. And from there I moved up here 5.5 years ago and decided it was getting a little busy, and it was so much greener here. The herbs were more prolific for more of the time of the year. And it's closer to wilderness up here, so here we be. So that's some of my herbal history. And it's just, to me, it's just so exciting to be able to do for my work what I love to do. So it's just, yeah, it's very nice. And
where do you teach classes in?
I teach out of my home, which is up on Greenwood Heights Drive in Neeland. And actually, we just moved, and now I have a whole classroom just for classes, which I've never had before. I'm really excited about that. So it's a room that we'll be developing that'll just be for classes, and we're putting in display herb gardens. And then I have an office in Arcata in the Moonrise Herb Building where I also teach classes. And I do my evening during the week classes usually in town. And then I do herb walks all over the county, all different places. I go to people's homes. I go to Trinidad, go out to the ocean, and go to the marsh. And
that's when somebody asks you to identify the herbs in their area, or do you set them up and people come to where you're doing the herbs?
Both. I set them up and advertise them, and people come and sign up, and then people also call me and say, will you come, and I have a few people together and we'd like to herb walk around this certain area, and then I go do that.
I'd like to bring my video camera on one of your walks so we can see the things out in the fields.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Yeah, it would be fun.
So, Jane, when do you harvest? Can you say when you harvest?
Yeah, that's a good question, buddy. You harvest, it depends what part of the plant you want. So if you want the leaf, if that's the part that you want from your plant, then you harvest it before it flowers. For the most part, now there are exceptions to every rule, with mints, you harvest them when they're flowering.
Oh.
Yeah, because they tend to be stronger. You can harvest them before, too. But usually with the mints, you harvest them when they're flowering.
And you use the flower, too.
And you use the flower, too. But other plants, like mullein, which is a beautiful fuzzy plant that grows in a rosette pattern, and then it sends up a flowering stalk. When it sends up its flowering stalk, the energy of the plant is mostly in the flower and not in the leaves.
And your sage and things like that.
You do those, well, you can do those either way, because they're mint family.
Oh.
but they aren't like a minty tasting, but they are mint family. And you want to harvest your flower, obviously, when it's flowering. You want to harvest your root when the energy is underneath the ground, which would be when the above ground part of the plant has died back. So you harvest your root in the spring and the fall, generally.
What are the roots? What root?
Dandelion roots. Dandelion is a wonderful, wonderful plant. And of course, it's in everybody's yards. It's a very good medicinal. Good root. And they make pullers just for dandelions that you can go to your nursery and get. The dandelion is very, very good herb for the liver, and the liver is one of the main organs in our body that helps us to assimilate and digest and cleanses our blood and helps us to be able to digest what we breathe in. It helps us to digest our emotions. It helps us to digest our food and any toxins. Everything has to go, the toxins have to go through your liver. So the healthier your liver, the healthier your body is.
Do you use that in a tea?
In a tea. And if you don't, yeah, use it in a tea, dandelion root.
Bitter?
It's very bitter.
You mix it with what then?
Then you can mix it with some stevia. You can mix it with licorice root, which is very sweet. You can mix it with a little cinnamon and orange peel, and it's still going to have a bitter flavor, so you kind of have to get used to that. Or you can take that herb in tincture. And what a tincture is, it's an alcohol preparation. They've been made for hundreds and hundreds of years, and actually all your old pharmacy books before 1920 are all herbal preparations, and they talk to you how to make your tinctures and how to make your dandelion, and those are sold in you can make them yourselves, or you can buy them in your herb shops or health food stores, and they come in little 1-ounce dropper bottles, and you take like 30 drops and drink it down, and then that's and then you don't have to have a whole cup of dandelion root tea. So for a lot of people, when they're using herbs medicinally, they use tinctures.
But if you were going to make tea, you would pull the root and you would slice the root and put it into your container, right?
Right, and with roots, you want to simmer them.
Before you
Okay.
make the tea.
With roots, you put your water and your roots, and you simmer them for about 20 minutes.
So you're going to leave them whole, or are you going to
Chop them up.
You're going to chop
Are
them
you going to use that whole thing that you,
up.
the liquid that's left, I mean, after you boiled it or simmered it, do you use the whole thing or a half a cup or?
How much would you take at a time?
Yeah. How much
You would
do
take
use
about
to
a
make
half a
tea?
cup to a cup at a time, and maybe,
And then mix
a cup or two a day if you're just doing this for generally, like maybe even just a half a cup a day if you're working on just, strengthening your body. Let's say if you have something like hepatitis and liver weakness, then you want to take, 2 strong cups a day, 2 to 3. That's something where herbs are really wonderful. They have there's a lot of herbs that really help your liver, and that's really useful because a lot of your pharmaceutical drugs are difficult, are hard on your liver, and your pharmaceutical drugs, there aren't drugs that are particularly helpful for strengthening your liver. So that's a place where herbs really are helpful. And also, you can dig up your roots and you chop them up, and then you lay them out on a basket or a screen, and you dry them. And then you put them in a jar, and then you have them for future use.
Have you studied with Native Americans, too?
Not extensively. No, I haven't had that opportunity. A little bits here and there. But I look forward to that time of doing more extensive studying with Native Americans. Native Americans have a different way of teaching, and they like you to live it and work with them, and you do that for years. It's not the way the white people teach. We say, I'm here giving you this remedy and that remedy. They would say, you come and you talk, be with me and come out and harvest with me, and in 6 months maybe, then you'll be ready to know what to do with that dandelion root, which is a good way. But we live in a fast-paced world, and we've evolved for better or for worse a lot of times, I think, into a different way. But I look forward to a time when I could study with a native person. Yeah. And so you dry, the important thing about drying herbs after you harvest them, whatever part of the herb it is that you don't want to dry it in the sun. Because if you dry it in the sun, it's going to zap the vitality of that plant. So when you think about it, if you take your peppermint leaves and you put them out in the sun, they're just going to get crispy. And what you want them to do is, if they're green, you want them to dry green. Okay, it's like parsley. When you buy dried parsley for using in cooking, it's green. If you dried that parsley in the sun or in an oven, it would be turned brown and get crispy.
You put them in the shade or in some place where it's dry and cool.
Dry and warm. You want it to be warm still, which is a little tricky in this climate. Ideally, 90 to 100 degrees is a good temperature, but in the shade. In your car, right. Yeah. An attic. An attic is very good.
So it's upside down?
Hanging them in bundles, upside down. You just want air all the way around. So like with a root, you can't hang it. So with a root, you put it on a basket that gets air underneath. And you just want air circulation, and you don't want direct light, and you want warm temperatures.
Dry them like straw flowers or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, because you wouldn't want to dry your straw flowers in the sun, because it would, the colors would dull. Yeah.
Can you talk about herbs and perfumes? Since I've lived in Humboldt County, I've caught whiffs of people who are not buying Chanel anymore. They're buying something more earthy.
Right.
What am I smelling mostly? What do you think is going on with...
There's a whole science called aromatherapy. And it's not new. It's just newly recognized. And aromatherapy is the science of healing with scent. So we all know what it's like when there's a rose and you smell a rose. It lifts your spirits. And it's like, oh, that's a lovely scent, you know, and you're happier in general. And rose is a scent that is said to work with the heart. And it helps to heal wounds of the heart, whether those emotional wounds, upsets, deaths in the family, illnesses, breakups of relationships. Rose is something with aromatherapy that's recommended, and it's used already. I mean, roses are given at times of weddings and funerals, at times of the heart. And the rose is, and there are also lots of, lavender is an essence that's used a lot, and lavender is for strengthening the nervous system. And actually, the people who teach aromatherapy say, when in doubt, use lavender. It has so many different uses, and most people really love it. And scents trigger different aspects of our brain, too. You know, when you smell different things, it triggers memories, and those memories also trigger moods and emotions. And so a lot of aromatherapy works with triggering the desired emotions in a person. Aromatherapy also is used for specific physical ailments, and it's oftentimes incorporated with herbal remedies. And in Europe, the doctors, as we look at our trained doctors, in this country don't use herbs or aromatherapy, but the European doctors do. And they write the prescription, and you go to the pharmacy and you get your tincture of herbal medicine and your lavender and rose oil in with that. So
I'm smelling tinctures, not somebody that's hung out around a stick of incense for an hour? Or
you aren't smelling tinctures so much. You may very well be smelling somebody who's been hanging around incense. And you may be smelling someone who has put the essential oil. An essential oil is what we're using with aromatherapy. And essential oils are little tiny bottles of like rose, lavender, vanilla, orange, lemon, sandalwood, patchouli, strawberry.
Isn't that what they'll tell you, to put a drop of it on a light bulb in your lamp, and then when the heat from the bulb, it makes the room smell?
That's right. And you're practicing aromatherapy, and you didn't even know that, maybe. That's exactly it. And essential oils are made by distillation. So you need a still, and you need a large quantity of the herb or the flower, the plant, and then it's distilled, you know, it's heated and gone into steam and then distilled back into liquid. And so those are very, very concentrated. 1 ounce of essential oil of peppermint, let's say, is equal to 350 gallons of peppermint tea. So essential oils are very concentrated, and they are perfume oils.
How is that different from rose water? How would you make rose water?
Rose water is a distillation too. Yeah, and it's a simple, I guess it's just a different way. I've made rose water with a simple kind of distillation myself, but I'm sure it's just a different distilling process.
It's not an easy process that just anybody does.
Well, you can make a simple rose water yourself. Yeah, you can. You want to know how to?
Glycerin? with the rose petals or something that you can make rose water?
Glycerin a lot of times is added to rose water. Glycerin's a preservative. And glycerin is also very emollient to the skin, which means it's very soothing. So rose water and glycerin is a lotion that a lot of people use. Just rose water and glycerin. Let's see. The way that you would make rose water is you would take a canning pot, and in the bottom of your canning pot you would put, let's say, half a brick or something similar. Then around that you would fill it up with fresh rose petals. Fresh herbs make much better. And of course you want to pick your roses that have a strong scent. A lot of roses now are just bred for beauty rather than scent. So you want some old-fashioned good scented roses. You fill that bottom part up to the height of the brick, and then you fill that with water. Just to the height of the brick. So you have your canning pot, you have a brick, you have your petals, you have your water. Then you put a bowl on top of your brick inside your canning pot. A bowl that fits in, and a pretty good, you want as large a bowl as will fit. And then you invert your canning lid, and you put ice on the lid, and you put your pot on the heat. So you're simmering your water and your with the roses in it. It's evaporating and hitting the lid, and the lid is inverted and it has ice on it and it's cold. So then it it condenses and drops into your bowl, and that's your rose water.
Oh, my word.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you can make lavender water and orange flower water and orange peels and lemon peels, and it's lovely. It is, and it's simple. And you, of course, need to keep replacing the ice as it melts, and make sure you don't deep fry your petals, because your water would then not smell so wonderful. So you need to, and you just simmer that until all that water is simmered, which takes usually, it depends, you know, how much is in there, but it usually takes about half hour, 45 minutes. But you really need to watch it, because you don't want it to scorch.
The Bulb Farms donated a whole bunch of lilies a few weeks back.
Wonderful.
And I found that about 4 of us were extremely allergic and avoided them as much as possible.
The pollen? Or the bulb? Or the smell. Oh.
Now, is the lily trying to keep me from eating it or something? Or
Possibly. Most lilies are edible. Maybe. It's probably the pollen. Do you have allergies to other things?
No, but if I was a bee, I would fly in the opposite direction. I mean, if I was it smells like they're trying to kill ants or something.
I wonder if they had used any sprays on their lilies?
It doesn't matter what kind of a lily it is, it'll drive me away. So
Always.
all my life, I don't know.
Oh.
So that's not common then, huh?
I haven't heard it before, but it may be. You said there were a number of you, so...
I was a bear in my last life and ate too many lilies.
Yeah. Possibly. Do you have any questions about things you're growing, whether they're edible or how to harvest them? Or?
Lemon verbena.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
It's a wonderful scent. Can you
Oh, lemon verbena is the most wonderful tea that I think that I've ever had.
I'm afraid to pick it, but it just smells so good.
Oh, lemon verbena is I think it's the most pure lemon scent of any plant that's lemon flavored, and it's just delicious. And it's a woody shrub, and it doesn't like the cold very much, so it's good to protect it in the wintertime. And you want to prune it back, but that's one of my favorite lemons.
Now mine has, last year it was about this tall, and now it's this tall, but all this seems to be bare, and we've got a top. How do I make it so that it'll...
Prune it back
So
after
I need to clip it down a little bit more.
Yeah. Clip it down more. And it's also because it's not that ecstatic about this climate, so it's a little woody anyway, but it's going to be woodier.
So I should move it in more of the sun?
Yes.
Okay.
It likes warmth.
Okay.
Yeah, and put straw over it in the wintertime, and yeah. Any other questions?
Do you have a picture of melons in your...
Oh, okay.
I have something in my yard.
Now mallow is edible, isn't it?
Mallow's edible. All the mallows, and mallow is in the same family as hollyhocks.
Right.
So all your hollyhocks are edible. Mm-hmm.
The rose mallow.
Right.
a lot of mallow.
Do you have a lot of mallow? And mallow is, mallow is kind of mucilaginous. Mucilaginous is a fancy word for slimy.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that's slimy that way, herbally, helps to soothe mucous membrane linings and to heal inside and outside. So cuts and wounds, just break up that mallow and put it on as a poultice. Or any kind of ulcerations in the stomach, mallow is very good for that. Or irritations anywhere. I mean, your mucous membrane, this is your outer mucous membrane, and then your inside lining is all the rest of your inside mucous membrane. Mallow is very good for
You
that.
might want to steep the flowers and drink it as a tea.
Uh-huh. Flowers and leaf, too.
And
Mm-hmm.
And you're just going to be so happy.
Go out to my garden.
Yeah, that's what we were saying. You just go out to your garden and have lunch.
That's right. That's what I do. I walk around and I get some lettuce and a little bit of carrots, and if I'm not growing them, of course, they're from the store, and then I go pick sheep sorrel and chickweed and miner's lettuce, and all your edible greens are much higher, your wild edible greens are much higher in nutritional value than your cultivated ones. So it's really good to eat a little bit of your wild greens to add your vitamin, up your vitamin and mineral intake. They don't have a picture of the, this is just the flowering stalk of the mullein. It looks a little bit, it's fuzzy like lamb's ears, the leaf is. But it's light green and it grows in a rosette, which a lot of plants have that pattern. Rosette pattern, which looks a little like primrose or something. A little like the primroses. Yeah. But it's not a great picture in that it doesn't have the bottom part. So what I mean by rosette is that the leaves would come out like this, in a circle, like your dandelion does, and then it sends up the flowering stalk. This is a good book on the gentle art of herb culture, herb gardening. It's called Herbal Bounty, and it's by Stephen Foster. And there's a lot of information here about edible and medicinal uses and how to organize your herb garden, except when you have to dig them all out of the ground in a few days and throw them in the next ground like I did.
About lamb's ear, you mentioned lamb's ear. Is that edible?
Lamb's ears, the flowers are edible. I don't know if the leaf is edible. And to me, I just grow it because it's so beautiful and because it's, well, I wonder this year if I was this ecstatic about it since I was pulling it out of every garden bed I have. But it's so beautiful and soft and to touch and doesn't need any water to grow at all. You don't need to water it at all. Yeah. Don't need to water it at all.
Do you teach a cooking class with herbs?
I have to, yeah. I teach usually once a year a wild herbs cooking class where we go out and we pick herbs and make like wild herb casserole and nettle soup and things like that. Arlene will be there the next time that I Stinging nettle.
I've heard that they're very tasty.
Stinging, it actually tastes quite a bit like spinach.
Does it really?
Turn you green like Milarepa if you eat too much.
That's right. That's right. It'll clean you out, that's for sure, if you eat too much wild greens. That's one thing, if you eat too many wild greens, you're clean you right out. It tastes quite a bit like spinach. It's very good. As soon as you pour the hot water over the nettle, it has no more sting to it. But the harvesting it is a little tricky. Gloves, long sleeves. I usually just take a bag and clip it and kind of let it fall into the bag. But you want to harvest the nettle before it flowers. After it sends its flowers, which are little racemes that hang down, then it's a little bit too strong. You want to use it for food before it flowers.
I'm thinking of something else, then. Something that goes into a globe. That's
A globe.
it's a globe and it's very, very prickly.
Thistle.
Thistle.
You're thinking of thistle. Those are edible too. The thing about the thistles, here's common nettle, $2.90. The thistles, like the nettle has a sting, which is actually fomic acid that goes into your skin and stings you, and the thistle has a pricker that pricks you. Okay, so with eating the thistle, you have to cut those off. Here's what the nettle looks like. the stinging nettle. It's just a very green-looking, you know.
Something different that I always thought was stinging nettle.
So that's a stinging nettle, and that's the flowers hanging down from it. And you want to harvest it before it flowers.
Tell us about your daughter. What herbs does she like the best? How old is she?
She's 2.
Oh, well.
And let's see, her first one that she really likes is fennel. It's very sweet, and she would pick it and chew it and gag on it and get a little bit down and a little bit back up. You know, it's kind of stringy, and they don't chew very well when they're younger. And she doesn't gag on it anymore, but at about 1 year old she was. And the thing about children that is so wonderful is that they learn the plants just like they learn cat and dog and house and people's names. And what's very interesting for me in years with working with children is that they don't confuse them. I mean, they learn plantain, and they look at it, and they know it's plantain. Because a lot of times parents are concerned that their children aren't going to be able to decipher which plant is which, and some are poisonous. And that certainly is something to be concerned about, and you want to be careful with that. But in general, children just really learn their plants, and it's easy. They just, you know, they're information stations, so they just take it all in. And she likes to make sun tea with me, and she gardens with me, and picks herbs and eats them. And she'll show you the plantain and say, you pick the plantain and you chew it up, and you know, you put it on your owies, and she'll do that and put it on her owies. And
did you name her Rose or something?
Did I name her Rose? I named her Juniper.
Juniper. All right.
She's also Jennifer too. She has 2 names. But she's a juniper tree, juniper berry. Let me find you plantain, because if it's in here. Plantain is a common weed that once you see it, you will say, I have seen that everywhere. And it's just so wonderful. It's the best thing for any kind of stings or bites. Yeah. Bruises. You recognize the plantain?
So you just, on a sting or a bite?
You just chew up the leaf and then just put it right on, and it draws out the sting. A nettle sting, it's wonderful. I mean, if you don't put something on a nettle sting, pretty much you'll sting or an itch for a couple days. And if you put plantain on it and just leave it on there for a little while, maybe repeat it again in another half hour, then the sting is almost always gone. Bee stings, if you tend to swell, if you pick the plantain and put that on, usually you will have no swelling or redness at all. And also, children love this plant too. It's so useful for cuts. It will stop bleeding too and heal wounds. And these are shooters. If you ever, you know, you take the stem over, wrap it over the flowering head, and then shoot it across the room. You don't remember doing that, huh?
You used to take rose petals and go.
Oh.
You done those?
No, I haven't done that.
Take a little rose petal and put it right on your thing, and then go. And go.
It's like those little
That's
plastic
Oklahoma.
bubbles
That's
that everybody
Oklahoma.
can-
Well, our kids take the thorn and put it on their nose so that then they're a unicorn.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I came to that. Right. Right. This book, if you're interested, this is a very good all-round herb book called The Holistic Herbal by David Hoffman. And in here he'll talk to you about how to use herbs, how to make a tea, how to make a tincture, how to make a salve, how to use those. And then there's different chapter, like a short chapter on the respiratory system, a short chapter on the urinary system. And then in the back is what's called Materia Medica, which is basically the herbs are described. So if you want to look up the uses of an herb. So an herb like this, the reason I say it's a book like this, it's a good all-round book, is because of those reasons. It tells you how to make the preparations, it tells you about some of the plants, and then it tells you about what you can do perhaps for a cough or a common cold. And so some books are just Materia Medica books, they just describe the herbs. And then this book I mentioned, the Herbal Gardening, Herbal Bounty by Stephen Foster. And then this book is The New Healing Yourself by Joy Gardner. And this book is one of those books where you can turn to burns And then she'll give you different types of remedies for burns. Like the first thing with burns is always to put it out in cold water or ice and then apply some aloe vera gel. Okay, you could look up having a sore throat and she would say take sage tea and mix it with salt and gargle with it. So it's a real good reference book as simple first aid type remedies. What can you use for stopping bleeding? Take your cayenne pepper off your shelf and put it in your cut. It works incredibly. You know, I have not had it burn unless, I haven't had it burn. When I've really needed it, which I have a couple times, and I've had a number of other people say it didn't burn, and then I've had some people say it did. And the ones who said it did said it was worth it. It stopped the bleeding that they had. So cayenne pepper is used a lot for things. It's even used for ulcers. Now, can you imagine something hot like that? It's used for eye washes. It's used for... It does, doesn't it? But I've known people to use it and say that it works well. It makes me hurt thinking about it, too, so it's not one I generally recommend because I just can't quite fathom it. Right, exactly. But usually for something like ulcers, I'd say, you know, take real soothing things like mallow and slippery elm and licorice. And
that would be a very good book to have.
What was her last name?
Gardner. Right. It is a very good book to have. Yeah.
You would a lot of times have those things right in the
Yeah.
kitchen.
Yep.
You could grab the cayenne
Yeah, like
pepper.
here's sage, lemon tea, calendula ointment, raw honey for wound. Raw honey is it's naturally antibacterial, and it's very good for cuts. It's very good for burns, and most people have honey around. So, oop, I'm tripping on myself. A lot of times it isn't raw, no.
Would other honey work as
Other honey will work, it just won't work quite as well. Yeah, the raw honey works better. Would anyone like more tea?
I would. There's that stinging nettle.
You're just thinking
Can't
that you can walk
visualize
around,
eating
huh?
that.
Right, just realized it.
Drink it. Reaction shot. Drink it.
Well, I already know what that. Carl, you want some?
Reaction shot. Don't take it on Arlene drinking it.
Is all the caffeine gone?
Carl wants some.
Yes.
Can we have to add a little caffeine to Carl?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Carl, you should try guarana. That's the most caffeine-y type thing that I have ever...
Now this is a weed, right? This one?
Fireweed, yeah. And that's blooming right now all around here. That's fireweed. Mhm.
That's right. Okay.
And then
We
this
used to
one is
call
all around here.
Montbretia fireweed.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Oh.
it was like because it's the right color, see, but
Right.
this is not the right color for fireweed.
And the fireweed got its name because it is one of the first things that comes up after there's a fire.
Oh, darn! I didn't know that.
Then you'll see all the fireweed coming up.
What's in bloom now? My husband's having an allergy, which they think they would...
Could be fireweed. That's blooming now.
There's a lot of wildflowers that are blooming right now out along the highways and everything. Is there, is it a Spanish broom, yellow?
Uh-huh,
beautiful
uh-huh.
clump
There's
of-
Spanish broom and French broom and Scotch broom that are all around here. And gorse is the English name for them. Gorse. With allergies, too, lemon water is something that's helpful for people. Mullein tea, you asked about the mullein. Had you been using the mullein?
No.
Mullein tea or the yerba santa tea. Those are all. And then things like dandelion, because basically you have an allergy because your body can't process whatever it is it's taking in. So since the liver does a lot of the processing, if you help with your liver a lot of times, then it'll help with people's allergies.
How about flowering quince? It has quince here, but it doesn't have flowering quince. Can you use the flowering quince at all?
It's edible. I don't know other than that. I haven't used it.
I've got something that I don't know what it is, and I got it from somewhere, and I didn't write the name down. But it's a low-growing, so the gray leaves, but the little hairy. It's a very tall, thin stem, and a little red flower on the top, and they're about this high. And the flower has a very sweet fragrance to it. And the flower's only about that big.
I'm not sure what that one would be. You can always bring it into the herb shop in Arcata. And if I'm there, you know, you just walk through the garden, the sliding glass doors are there. or into the shop, and they know a lot of the, or the nurseries, or I'm not sure what that one.
Tall stem of the
No, or any of the other nurseries. Mad River Gardens has quite a good selection of herb starts. Mad River Gardens in Arcata.
Are there herbs that like the redwoods or don't like the redwoods?
Well, because of the redwood tree is very acidic, and so there are a lot of plants that don't like to grow under the redwoods. That's why they say be careful using redwood mulch in your garden and things like that. But there's certainly a number that do, but that's why when you go through the forest, there isn't a great variety of plants, and also because there isn't a lot of sun that comes through. But you get beautiful things in the redwoods like calypso orchids and wild ginger and false lily of the valley and a lot of the berries, huckleberries and salals and redwood sorrel. You know the little clover-looking ground cover that's underneath most of your redwoods with a pink flower? That's actually not a true clover, it's a sorrel, and it's edible, and it's very lemony, soury tasting. It's real tart. It's a nice flavor.
Can you tell me about manzanita and possible uses?
Manzanita is, there's a number of different manzanitas, and the one that's used the most, they're all can be used pretty much interchangeably. The ones that's used the most and written up the most in your herb books is the Arctostaphylos, which is the genus for manzanita, Uva ursi. That's the species. And if you wanted to look up Uva ursi, then you would see a lot of uses. That is manzanita. Mainly it's used as a topical astringent. It helps to dry. And it also is used as a diuretic. It's very helpful for taking excess water weight out of the body, and it's also very helpful for healing bladder and kidney problems. And it's used a lot in potpourris. Those pretty little, the leaves of Uva ursi or the manzanitas are used.
Those would probably be better for people to take than this, what do they call it, Lasix and some of these other things if they have water retention.
Yeah, there's a lot of herbs are very good for water retention. Parsley is one, eating a lot of parsley and drinking parsley tea. The manzanita leaf, corn silk, the silk off your corn. Now you don't use the brown part that's out, you use the yellow green part that's around the corn, and it's very sweet. It tastes like corn. It tastes like drinking corn tea. That's very good. And so if people tend to get bladder infections or have weakness in their urinary tract, doing things like eating parsley and drinking corn silk tea and Uva ursi. And
I want to thank you very much for speaking to us today.
You're welcome.
It was very enjoyable.
You're welcome. Laugh.